I am a 32-year-old male and have been married to my wife, a 30-year-old female, for 5 years. During this period, there has been a notable shift in our relationship dynamics. Initially, we shared a similar set of values and established ourselves in our respective careers. I pursued a technical field of study at a trade school and subsequently secured entry-level positions in my chosen profession. Over time, I demonstrated my capabilities and gained recognition, advancing to more senior roles. However, in recent times, there has been a noticeable change in our relationship. My wife, who holds a graduate degree and occupies a management position, has expressed concerns about the growing distance between us. She perceives a shift in our values and a lack of alignment in our professional goals. I have built a reputation in coding to the point where my references have surpassed my education. My wife has a graduate degree and works in a management position, which has created a degree of friendly tension. At the outset, I expressed my frustration with middle management, viewing them as impediments to my advancement. My wife viewed middle management as a necessary function for directing personnel and resources. In contrast, I was subjected to a series of ineffective middle managers who perceived code developers as interchangeable components. They imposed unfeasible deadlines, promised features to clients without authorization, and perpetuated scope creep with each instance I brought it to her attention. Subsequently, my manager implemented another questionable policy, and she consistently sided with him. It is noteworthy that she had not yet met him. She observed that he perceived things differently than I did. After approximately a year of dating, I learned to refrain from sharing details about my workday with her unless it involved time off or a raise. I often felt that she resented the fact that I had not pursued a 4-year degree. She expressed interest in pursuing a graduate degree early on in our relationship, but when I explained the financial implications, she decided against it. She had minimal debt and our incomes were comparable. Approximately 2 years ago, I began working for a company owned by an individual who recognized my potential and offered me a 50% ownership stake. In addition to my wife and manager, I also work with a male colleague who is a highly effective team member. Despite not holding a technical lead position, he exemplifies the qualities of a Scrum Master. I would describe him as someone who is able to maintain a supportive and collaborative approach, rather than being overly directive. He is an excellent supervisor. Overall, the first 4 years of marriage were quite positive. I did not voice any concerns about managers from work, and my wife did not encourage me to invest significant sums of money. A document and a financial obligation, we had an enjoyable time together, frequently engaging in date nights. We shared interests such as cooking, reading, and watching movies. However, when the initial lockdown occurred, we both began working from home. Our residence is spacious, with 3 additional bedrooms, should we decide to have children in the future. One bedroom has already been converted into an office for me. When the lockdown began, the second bedroom was converted into an office for her. We both commuted to work, but we held disparate views on the subject. I would rise, prepare breakfast, shower, dress in a suit, and then proceed to my home office. I am not a fan of suits and ties, incidentally, but I find that they help me to mentally prepare for the workday. My wife, on the other hand, rolls out of bed, eats breakfast, brushes her teeth, and puts on a t-shirt. She then proceeds to enter her office, equipped with an iPad, to engage in Candy Crush between emails. I perceive this as a work-from-home scenario, whereas she views it as a work-from-home situation. I digress. It is intriguing how proximity can create distance. She has numerous meetings throughout the day, which I am aware of due to her tendency to keep her door open. The door is kept ajar and I can hear them. I have 1 meeting a day, a scrum, and it is brief. I close my door for my own meetings, which I have held for 5 months. My colleague stated that she felt insulted that I closed my door for the daily scrum. I explained that it was for peace and to maintain my focus on work. She stated that she felt like I was hiding something. I attempted to maintain our shared hobbies, but she dismissed it as though we see each other all day. In retrospect, I should have pressed the matter further, but I did not. I regarded the lockdown as temporary, and perhaps I should not have done so. The situation deteriorated significantly when her company instituted a partial office reopening, and she seized the opportunity to. She was among the 50% of the company that reverted to a rearranged office configuration to facilitate social distancing. I do not fault her for this decision. I, too, miss the camaraderie of the office, but my company has not yet reopened its premises. As long as I have access to my development environment, I do not require the physical presence of my colleagues. I believe that several of her other colleagues, the workers, influenced her to remain after work to socialize with them and consume beverages at a local establishment. The worker in question was insistent on learning more, yet she was secretive and guarded. She became increasingly distant and aloof. It felt as though I had a roommate, not a wife. Last month, on a weekend, she placed her old iPad on the desk and said, "Can you wipe this? I want to gift this to my niece." I acquiesced, as I often do for the family, and didn't think much about it. She subsequently left for another company. I then accessed the iPad. Perhaps my wife's actions were becoming increasingly brazen. It is possible that she believed I would not examine the device and simply perform a factory reset. In any case, I accessed the device and discovered her messaging application had been used to send videos to her boss. These messages indicated that she had been engaged in an illicit affair for a period of 2 months. I was overcome with a sense of numbness, as though my blood had turned to ice. This feeling was reminiscent of the scene in the film Equilibrium, in which the polygraph flatlined. I proceeded to copy all relevant data and store it in the cloud. I initiated the process of developing independent projects outside of my professional responsibilities and began to search for legal counsel. Initially, I did not confront my wife directly because I was uncertain about my future actions. The new sensation in my body felt like I was both numb and walking through water. She was either unaware of this or did not care by that point. Our relationship had already reached a point of irremediable conflict. I contacted a lawyer and he advised me to continue investigating and to maintain silence. He suggested I engage the services of a private investigator and recommended a reputable one. For the past 4 weeks, we have been gathering evidence and preparing the necessary documentation for divorce. It is important to remain patient and allow the legal process to unfold. Yesterday, my lawyer informed me that he had nearly completed the filing. Our state is at fault, and the PI has obtained a substantial amount of evidence, including photos, videos, and texts. It seemed like a relatively straightforward case. However, last night, I experienced a sudden change in emotional state. My wife returned home late, and I do not recall the exact details of our interaction. I expressed my hope that she would reconsider her actions. It was worth her boss, who had become increasingly hostile and vengeful. I was accused of failing to provide emotional support, despite the fact that I was the primary breadwinner. I was even criticized for lacking intellectual stimulation, despite the fact that I had a lawyer. When I informed her of this, she laughed and called my bluff pathetic. She asserted that I would not be leaving her, even if I divorced her, because I would still be receiving half of my paycheck. She also suggested that I could at least enjoy occasional access to her. She suggested that we engage in sexual intercourse, indicating that this would prevent me from jeopardizing the relationship. However, I informed her that this was not a traditional marriage. She expressed skepticism, stating that in the 21st century, women can have their cake and eat it too. She then proceeded to retire for the evening. I sent an email to my superior requesting a week's leave to address a personal matter. The following morning, she departed, informing me that she would not wait up. I proceeded to my lawyer's office, where he informed me that the necessary documents were prepared. A process server was present and I inquired as to the manner in which the papers were to be served. I informed him that my lawyer, bless him, had advised against such a course of action. I had encountered numerous individuals who sought to engage in what they perceived to be a humorous or retaliatory form of service, and I consistently dissuaded them from doing so. Judges are not inclined to appreciate such tactics. The process server informed me that this course of action could potentially result in a loss of alimony or assets. I was undeterred by these warnings. Her words had caused me significant distress. I was determined to pursue this course of action. The lawyer attempted to dissuade me from this course of action but ultimately relented when he, the process server, having heard my idea, subsequently informed me that he had laughed, and proceeded to describe me as his hero. I was compelled to place an order for a specific item with an urgent delivery deadline. I instructed the process server to collect the item and deliver it, along with the relevant documents, to my wife's place of employment. Upon completion of the task, the process server informed me of the circumstances surrounding the delivery. He stated that he had arrived at my wife's office with the aforementioned large box and documents, only to find her engaged in conversation with a group of colleagues. The process server then proceeded to inquire with the workers and colleagues present at the office whether they could ascertain the identity of the individual in question. Upon confirming her name, the process server then inquired as to the purpose of his visit. In response, the process server placed the aforementioned box on a nearby desk and proceeded to open it. The contents of the box were a cake, which had been decorated with a custom image printed in frosting. This was a previously unknown fact to me until that morning. The image in question depicted my wife and her boss in an embrace, with their bodies clothed but with their actions clearly visible through the use of accompanying text. He then wrote, "Here's your cake, eat it," piped in icing above the image. In icing above the image of my wife and her boss in an embrace, clothed but with obvious sexual intercourse. The process server then placed the documents next to the cake box on the table. My wife then emitted a loud screech, and at least 8 people in the office saw the cake. My wife then proceeded to swat the large cake box off the table, where it fell on the carpet. However, the image was still visible, and several of her co-workers began to berate her. The process server was met with a hostile response and was forced to retreat. My phone was inundated with messages, and I chose to send her to voicemail. I do not read her texts. She has not returned home, but her mother informed me that she plans to stay with them for the time being. The initial excitement of the cake was overwhelming, but as time passed, I found myself reflecting on the advice of my lawyer. Did I make the right decision? I am still on leave from work. My boss has kindly granted me 2 weeks leave, rather than the 1 week I had requested. I have already divided our savings in half, placed my half in an account in my name, and changed the autopay for the mortgage. This has the effect of freezing the account. My lawyer has advised me to take the following steps with the household funds. Firstly, we have no children. Secondly, I am seeing a therapist to help me. I have found a therapist who is well-versed in helping with infidelity. I have consulted with a professional who specializes in assisting individuals who have been betrayed by their partners. I have met with this specialist on 2 occasions, and I am now experiencing a greater sense of equilibrium. However, I am still encountering occasional periods of distress, albeit at a level that is significantly reduced compared to what I was experiencing previously. There is still a considerable discrepancy between the 2 states of mind. Following the incident involving the cake, I am now following the advice of my lawyer in all matters related to this situation. He has advised me that I can either choose to be happy or to adhere to the advice he is providing. I have come to understand the rationale behind this advice. If my wife wishes to return to the marital residence, I am legally prohibited from evicting her. However, I am advised to record all future interactions with her. She has not expressed a desire to return to the marital residence, but is currently residing with her mother. She did, however, express a desire to visit on Saturday to discuss the matter further. My lawyer advised me that I could permit this visit, but suggested that it might be preferable to conduct the discussion at his office. I presented this to her in an email with her own lawyer present as well as myself. She responded that she did not have a lawyer. My lawyer informed her that, barring her attendance at his office with witnesses to record the meeting, this was my condition for talking with her. She accepted, and so 2 mutual friends were present during the encounter. All 3 individuals had their phones on the table, ready to record. My wife entered the room and attempted to give me an awkward hug. I simply held up my hand, and the recording began. The 4 of us sat down at the kitchen table. My wife expressed remorse, stating that she felt like she was watching a movie. In contrast to her previous role of being in charge of her life, this new dynamic felt thrilling and exhilarating. With a sense of excitement, she inquired if I was interested in learning the reason behind her behavior. I informed her that, at this juncture, I was not particularly concerned about the specifics. She felt a sense of obligation to me and proceeded to share that, upon returning to the office after its reopening, she had developed close relationships with 3 female co-workers. The 3 women were approximately a few years older than my wife, and 2 of them were divorced. They attempted to gain her trust by suggesting that she owed more than she was getting. They frequently inquired about her home life. The ringleader, in particular, seemed to be psychoanalyzing me based on my wife's stories. My wife had previously shared with them some details about my experiences with managers in my early career. The ringleader interpreted this information as indicating that I was threatened by educated people. This is indicative of the assumption that I am threatened by educated individuals. The ringleader informed my wife that I was a submissive male and that she required a more assertive partner. I may have reacted with verbal aggression, but ultimately, I would have yielded to her demands. My wife's employment remains secure for the time being, but only just. The individuals who witnessed the incident were my wife, the 3 witches, and, according to her, 2 other colleagues. The boss promptly terminated the affair, instructed her to communicate exclusively via email, and warned that any attempt to visit his office unaccompanied would result in the immediate involvement of a colleague. The 3 witches swiftly turned against her, publicly denouncing her actions as reprehensible. The other co-worker, the workers, according to her, were reluctant to become involved with her sexually, so she did not file a report with the Human Resources Department. She stated that her 3 friends had abruptly changed their attitudes towards her, which prompted her to reflect on the situation. She appeared remorseful and admitted that she had requested a sum of $5,000. I was perplexed because there were funds remaining in her account. I ensured that she had access to the money, which she was using to live with her mother. It became evident that the ringleader and the other 2 accomplices sought remuneration for their silence, for blackmailing her, and for imposing a deadline. Otherwise, she was imploring for assistance. I informed her that there was no returning to the status quo ante. After this incident, everything would be different. If she yielded now, it would result in further financial demands later. It would be prudent for her to report the incident to the relevant authorities, including her employer and her colleagues. The worker appeared to be considering the situation, but she did eventually inquire about the possibility of legal action. I informed her that our relationship was untenable and that I could not provide her with the support she needed to navigate the divorce process. I could only offer advice on how to handle her work situation, but she would likely require the assistance of a professional to do so. In addition, I advised her to seek therapy, as someone who could transition from derisive behavior to desperate pleas in the span of a week likely requires assistance in self-reflection and emotional regulation. She highlighted the cake incident, and I responded that I am indeed receiving treatment for that issue. She subsequently departed, and I am currently unaware of her plans regarding my counsel or her interactions with her colleagues. It is curious why it is always the coworker who is the perpetrator of this phenomenon. In my final update from the first week back at work, my supervisor informed us that we could leave at noon today for Good Friday. I am making significant progress. I am still seeing an individual therapist and, last weekend, I drove out into the rural roads to unwind and encountered a dog breeder as I was driving by. I was intrigued, so I stopped to inquire. The breeder was an Asian man who had a breed of Asian dogs I had never seen before. He was describing the characteristics of the dogs. After playing with a few of them, I was informed that they were extremely loyal and brave. I am contemplating the purchase of one, despite the high cost. I believe they are called Dost. My wife has always expressed interest in acquiring a dog, but she has never found a breed that suits her. My wife has not yet returned to the marital residence or made any direct attempts to contact me. However, she has retained legal counsel. My lawyer contacted me and said something to the effect of, "It is recommended that you prepare for a visit to a marriage counselor." I initially expressed my reluctance, but the divorce was proceeding regardless. The attorney then suggested that, in normal circumstances, he would advise the other attorney to pursue other avenues. However, in this case, he felt it was necessary to present me as a reasonable person, which meant being open to reasoned requests. This is an example of why it is important to heed the advice of your attorney. Had I not expressed my anger, I would have been able to ignore this request. He did, however, provide counsel for this session. It was advised that I should not admit fault, concede that I had failed in any way, nor agree to anything, not even a second session. The recommendation was simply to attend this session. Furthermore, if I still wished to proceed with the divorce, I was instructed to answer questions as neutrally as possible. It was emphasized that I should not yell, shout, or accuse. The visit, which could be described as such, was conducted via Zoom. It was held in my home, my wife's mother's home, and the counselor's office. It is noteworthy that the counselor was inclined to ascribe blame to both parties. It was evident that the counselor perceived the necessity for distance in this situation. I simply stated that I did not concur with the notion that a marital rift is the result of the actions of only 2 individuals. It was evident that my wife and her supervisor were both invested in maintaining this perspective, which was anchored in the past. There was a possibility of a promising future, but the counselor's focus on past behaviors as a predictor of future behaviors was evident. I would be remiss to suggest that I had engaged in any form of mind games or I was able to effectively deflect her attempts to assign blame to me by not engaging with her for the majority of the session. Instead, I focused on maintaining a neutral stance, which lasted for approximately 2 hours. During this time, my wife and the counselor attempted to persuade me to accept at least some degree of responsibility for the situation. They seemed to be suggesting that by acknowledging my role, I could facilitate a more constructive approach to resolving the issue. Towards the end of the session, the counselor inquired about my demeanor. I explained that I was attempting to maintain a detached and objective stance, given the circumstances. I also mentioned that I was aware of the potential psychological impact of infidelity. As post-traumatic stress disorder, the counselor indicated that he had encountered a similar situation previously. With the session's allotted time nearly expired and the counselor preparing to sign me out, my wife inquired if I was amenable to attending another session the following weekend. I informed her that I was not inclined to do so. She then requested that I reconsider and suggested potential accommodations that might persuade me to agree to a session the following week. I informed her that I was leaving and signed off. I am currently awaiting further developments and will respond accordingly. I am unable to accept this proposition without reservation, solely for the purpose of enabling my legal counsel to present a compelling argument that I am a law-abiding individual who has exhibited a single instance of aberrant behavior, rather than a pattern of misconduct. Regrettably, this marks the final update from the user prior to his cessation of contributions. He has not provided any further insights or updates on this matter. Should any new developments emerge, I will create a new video to address them. I encourage those with an interest in this topic to subscribe to my channel and, if possible, to provide positive reinforcement through likes.